Two police cruisers screech to a halt outside a million-dollar home. Officers storm the porch, hands hovering over their holsters, demanding ID from the black woman watering her hydrangeas. They assume they have caught a brazen burglar. They have absolutely no idea they just cornered a ruthless United States federal attorney. Sierra Quinn had earned her peace and quiet. At 38 years old, she was the deputy chief of the criminal division at the United States Attorney's Office for the Northern District. Her career was a relentless, high-stakes battlefield of prosecuting cartel money launderers, corrupt city officials, and white-collar criminals who thought their wealth made them untouchable. She was known in the federal courthouse as a prosecutor with a mind like a steel trap and a demeanor of absolute ice. But today, she was not a federal prosecutor. She was just a first-time homeowner trying to enjoy a rare weekend off. Sierra had closed on a beautiful four-bedroom colonial in Fairview Estates, an affluent, tightly knit, and predominantly white suburb just outside the city limits. The neighborhood was famous for its manicured lawns, its aggressive homeowners association, and its profound insular quiet. Moving in had been a chaotic blur between federal trials, and Sierra was finally getting around to the last of the unpacked boxes stacked in her garage. It was a crisp autumn morning. Sierra was dressed in a faded, oversized college hoodie, a pair of worn-in gray sweatpants, and slip-on sneakers. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun, and she wore zero makeup. She carried a watering can back and forth from the garage sink to the large ceramic planters framing her front door, humming softly to herself and enjoying the crisp air. Directly across the street, peering through the slight opening of her plantation shutters, was Eleanor Crow. Eleanor was the self-appointed neighborhood watchdog. She had lived in Fairview Estates for 20 years and knew the make, model, and license plate of every vehicle that belonged on Maplewood Drive. When the previous owner of Sierra's house, an elderly widower named Arthur, passed away, Eleanor had kept a close eye on the property. Now, seeing a black woman in oversized sweats casually walking up and down the driveway of the Henderson place, carrying things in and out of the garage, Eleanor's mind immediately jumped to the worst possible conclusion. She did not walk over to introduce herself. She did not wave. Instead, Eleanor picked up her smartphone and dialed 911. "Yes, dispatch. I have an emergency," Eleanor whispered urgently into the receiver, her eyes locked on Sierra. "There is a suspicious individual prowling around 402 Maplewood Drive. The owner passed away recently, and this woman is just walking around the property like she owns it. She's looking into the garage. I think she's trying to steal things. You need to send someone right away before she breaks through the front door." The profound quiet of Fairview Estates was shattered. Sierra was standing on her front porch, carefully pruning a dead leaf from a hydrangea bush, when she heard the distinct, heavy rumble of powerful engines. She turned to see two local police cruisers turn sharply onto Maplewood Drive. They did not have their sirens blaring, but the red and blue lights were flashing brightly, reflecting off the pristine windows of the surrounding homes. The cruisers abruptly angled into her driveway, parking in a V-shape that effectively blocked the driveway exit. Sierra frowned, lowering her pruning shears. Her analytical mind immediately began processing the situation. As a federal attorney who worked alongside law enforcement daily, her first thought was not panic, but rather curiosity. Was there a neighborhood emergency? A fugitive on the run? The doors of the cruisers popped open. From the lead vehicle stepped Officer Harlan Brody. Brody was a 15-year veteran of the local force, a man whose thick neck and aggressive posture suggested he viewed every interaction as a physical contest. He was destined to win. From the second vehicle emerged Officer Reed Voss, a rookie barely 6 months out of the academy, looking slightly tense as he followed Brody's lead. Brody unclasped the retaining strap on his holster, a subtle but highly aggressive gesture, and marched deliberately up the paved walkway toward Sierra. Voss flanked him to the right, hand resting on his radio. "Ma'am, step away from the front door and keep your hands where I can see them," Brody barked, his voice echoing loudly in the quiet suburban street. Sierra froze, genuinely taken aback by the hostility in his tone. She looked left, then right, ensuring he was actually speaking to her. "Excuse me?" she asked, her voice calm and measured. "I said step away from the door," Brody repeated, closing the distance until he was standing at the base of the porch stairs, looking up at her. His eyes scanned her faded hoodie and sweatpants with blatant suspicion. "What are you doing here?" Sierra placed the pruning shears on the small patio table. She did not step back. She stood her ground on her own porch. "I'm watering my plants, officer. Is there a problem?" "We received a call about a suspicious person trespassing on this property," Brody said, hooking his thumbs into his duty belt. "Neighbors say the owner of this house passed away, so I'll ask you again. What exactly are you doing here?" Sierra felt a cold, hard knot form in her stomach. The realization washed over her instantly. She was a black woman in sweatpants in a wealthy, predominantly white neighborhood. Somebody had called the cops on her for simply existing on her own property. A deep, simmering indignation began to burn in her chest, but years of courtroom litigation had trained her to keep her emotions completely locked down. When she spoke, her voice was as smooth and unyielding as glass. "I am perfectly aware of who the previous owner was," Sierra replied calmly. "However, the property was sold. I am the new homeowner. I live here. Now, if you don't mind, I have a lot of unpacking to do." Officer Brody let out a short, cynical scoff. He exchanged a glance with Rookie Officer Voss, rolling his eyes. "You live here?" Brody repeated, his tone dripping with profound disbelief. "In this house?" "That is correct," Sierra said, crossing her arms over her chest. "Okay then," Brody said, taking a step up onto the first stair of her porch. "Prove it. I need to see your ID." The demand hung in the crisp autumn air. Officer Voss stepped up beside Brody, his posture rigid. Across the street, Eleanor Crow had completely opened her blinds now, eagerly watching the drama unfold. Her phone pressed to her chest. Sierra looked down at Officer Brody. In her line of work, she relied on police officers. She respected the badge and the difficult, often dangerous job that came with it. But as a prosecutor who specialized in civil rights violations and police corruption, she also knew exactly where the boundaries of police authority began and ended. Officer Brody had just crossed a massive legal line, and Sierra was not about to let him trample her constitutional rights on her own front porch. "No," Sierra said simply. Brody blinked, clearly unaccustomed to hearing that word. The smirk vanished from his face, replaced by a dark, angry flush. "Excuse me?" "I said no," Sierra repeated, her voice projecting clearly. "I am not going to show you my ID." Brody took another step up the stairs. He was now standing on the porch itself, invading her personal space. "Listen to me very carefully, lady. This isn't a request. We are conducting an official investigation into a reported burglary in progress. You are a suspect. Now hand over your identification, or things are going to get very difficult for you." Sierra did not flinch. She locked eyes with Brody, slipping effortlessly into the persona that made defense attorneys sweat in federal court. "Officer, let's be very clear about the law here. We are in a state that does not have a stop and identify statute that applies to consensual encounters. Furthermore, for you to demand my identification, you need reasonable, articulable suspicion that I have committed, am committing, or am about to commit a crime, as established by Terry versus Ohio. A phone call from a nosy neighbor who doesn't recognize me does not meet the legal threshold for reasonable suspicion, especially when I am standing openly on a porch watering plants in broad daylight." Rookie Officer Voss's eyes widened slightly. He looked at Brody, clearly unsettled by Sierra's precise, rapid-fire legal terminology. Brody," Voss muttered quietly. Brody ignored him. His ego was profoundly bruised. To him, Sierra was not a citizen asserting her rights. She was a defiant suspect trying to outsmart him. In Brody's world, authority was absolute, and defiance was met with immediate escalation. "I don't need a law lecture from someone prowling on a porch," Brody snarled, his hand dropping back to his handcuffs. "You are interfering with the police investigation. If you don't provide your name and date of birth right now, I am going to arrest you for obstructing an officer." You can't arrest someone for obstruction merely for refusing to provide ID when no underlying crime has been established, Sierra fired back, her tone sharp and authoritative. "I am on my own private property. I have broken no laws. You have no warrant, no probable cause, and no legal right to detain me. I am formally asking you to step off my porch." "That's it," Brody snapped. He lunged forward, closing the final 2 feet between them in a split second. Sierra gasped as Brody's heavy, calloused hand clamped down viciously on her left wrist. The sheer physical force of his grip was shocking. He jerked her arm forward, spinning her around toward the brick facade of her own house. "Hey, get your hands off me!" Sierra shouted, the shock finally breaking her icy composure. "This is an unlawful arrest. You are violating my Fourth Amendment rights." "Stop resisting!" Brody yelled, though Sierra was not fighting back. She was merely rigid with shock. Brody slammed her roughly against the brick wall next to her front door. The rough masonry scraped painfully against her cheek. "Voss, get over here and secure her right arm," Brody commanded. Voss rushed up the steps, looking pale and panicked. "Ma'am, please just cooperate," he stammered as he grabbed her right arm, pulling it behind her back. "I am cooperating with the law. You are breaking it," Sierra said loudly, her voice echoing down the street, hoping the neighbors were listening to every word. "My name is Sierra Quinn. You are detaining me under color of law without probable cause. You are making a massive mistake." The cold, heavy steel of the handcuffs bit into Sierra's wrists. She heard the distinct click, click, click as the ratchets tightened, biting painfully into her skin. She was completely immobilized, pinned against the home she had recently closed on, humiliated in front of a neighborhood she had barely moved into. Brody stepped back, breathing heavily, a triumphant smirk returning to his face. "Sierra Quinn, huh? Well, Sierra, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." "You better hope," Sierra said, turning her head to glare at him with a look of pure, unadulterated legal hellfire, "that you remember those Miranda rights, Officer Brody, because before this day is over, someone is going to be reading them to you." Brody laughed loudly, a booming, arrogant sound that echoed off the surrounding houses. "Yeah, right. I'm shaking in my boots. Let's go, homeowner. We'll see how smart you are when you're sitting in a holding cell." He grabbed her roughly by the bicep, dragging her away from her front door and leading her down the porch steps. As they walked down the driveway, Sierra looked across the street. Eleanor Crow was standing on her front lawn now, arms crossed, a smug, satisfied smile on her face as she watched the police march the suspicious woman away in handcuffs. Sierra did not look down. She held her head high, her mind racing, calculating her next moves. She would not argue with them in the squad car. She would not scream or cry. She was going to let Officer Harlan Brody dig his grave as deep as he possibly could, because what Officer Brody did not know was that Sierra's boss, United States Attorney Quentin Hale, was an aggressive, no-nonsense enforcer of civil rights violations. What Brody did not know was that his body camera footage was about to become Exhibit A in a federal civil rights lawsuit. And what Brody absolutely did not know was that he was going to walk into the police precinct holding area, look at the television screen, and realize he had just handcuffed and assaulted the top federal prosecutor in the state. The trap was set. Now it was time to let the karma hit. The back of a police cruiser is intentionally designed for maximum discomfort. The hard plastic seats are molded to prevent any semblance of relaxation, and the slick surface offers no grip as the vehicle turns tight corners. As Officer Brody navigated the winding roads out of Fairview Estates, he made sure to take every turn a little too fast. A petty display of power meant to rattle the woman secured in the back. Sierra Quinn sat in absolute silence. The cold steel of the handcuffs dug relentlessly into her wrists, her shoulders aching from being pinned behind her back. But she did not wince. She stared straight ahead through the heavy wire mesh separating her from the front seats. "Quiet back there now, aren't we?" Brody taunted, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "Usually you people are screaming about lawsuits and your cousins who know a lawyer by the time we hit the main road. Reality setting in, homeowner." Beside him, Officer Voss stared out the passenger window, his knuckles white as he gripped his radio. "Hey, Brody, maybe we should run her plates or check the property records when we get back, just to be sure. She seemed pretty confident about the Terry versus Ohio stuff." "Shut up, Voss," Brody snapped. "She's a squatter or a burglar trying to play smart. I've been on the job 15 years. I know a liar when I see one. She refused a lawful order. That's obstruction. Case closed." The cruiser pulled into the sally port of the Oak Ridge Police Department. Sierra was yanked from the back seat, marched through the heavy steel doors, and deposited in front of the booking desk. The precinct was a bustling, chaotic hub of ringing phones, shouting detainees, and tired-looking officers. Desk Sergeant Wade Kowalski, a weary man with graying hair and a thick mustache, did not even look up from his paperwork. "What have we got, Brody?" "Obstruction of justice, resisting arrest, and highly suspected burglary," Brody announced loudly, puffing out his chest. "Caught her prowling around a deceased guy's house in Fairview Estates, refused to ID herself." Kowalski finally looked up, his eyes landing on Sierra. She stood tall, her posture completely unfazed by the humiliating environment. She did not look like a burglar. She looked like someone who was quietly, methodically memorizing every badge number in the room. "All right, ma'am. Name and date of birth," Kowalski sighed, fingers hovering over his keyboard. "Sierra Quinn, October 14th, 1987, she replied smoothly. Kowalski typed it in. "Take the cuffs off, Brody. Let's get her fingerprinted and put her in holding cell 3 while I run her through the system." Brody unlocked the cuffs with a heavy sigh. Sierra rubbed her bruised wrists, her eyes never leaving Brody's face. "I'm requesting my phone call," Sierra stated. It was not a question. Yeah, you'll get it after processing," Brody sneered, shoving a fingerprint card toward her. "Hope you know a good bail bondsman." After the humiliating process of fingerprinting and a pat-down search, Sierra was escorted into a sterile concrete holding cell smelling strongly of bleach and stale sweat. The heavy iron door clanged shut behind her. The lock echoed with a final, definitive thud. She sat down on the metal bench, smoothed out her faded college hoodie, and waited. A young deputy unlocked the door and handed her a cordless phone through the bars. 5 minutes. He grunted. Sierra dialed a number she knew by heart. It was not a family member. It was not a defense attorney. It was the direct secured cell phone line of Quentin Hale, the United States Attorney for the Northern District. It rang. "Hale," a deep gravelly voice answered. "Quentin, it's Sierra," she said. Her voice dropped an octave, slipping effortlessly into her professional, authoritative cadence. "Sierra, I thought you were unpacking boxes today. Don't tell me you're calling about the cartel indictment. I explicitly told you to take the weekend off." "I'm afraid my weekend off was interrupted," Sierra said, her tone icy. "I'm currently sitting in holding cell 3 at the Oak Ridge Police Department." There was a profound, heavy silence on the other end of the line. When Quentin spoke again, the casual banter was completely gone. The shark had smelled blood in the water. "Excuse me, are you hurt?" "I'm fine, bruised wrists, scraped cheek. I was arrested on my own front porch while watering my plants. The arresting officer, a Harlan Brody, detained me without reasonable suspicion, demanded ID, and when I refused, he assaulted me, cuffed me, and charged me with obstruction." He arrested the deputy chief of the Federal Criminal Division for watering her own plants, Quentin repeated slowly, the fury vibrating through his words. "A neighbor called it in as a suspicious person. Brody wanted a conviction, not an investigation." Sierra summarized. "He clearly doesn't know who I am, and he's currently parading around the precinct bragging about bagging a burglar." "Sierra, listen to me." Quentin's voice was deadly calm. "Do not say another word to anyone. Do not answer any questions. I am calling Special Agent Cole Vale at the FBI field office right now. We are coming to get you. Sit tight." "Take your time, Quentin," Sierra said, a small dangerous smile finally breaking across her face. "I want them to process my fingerprints. I want them to run my name through the national database. I want the system to tell them exactly who they just locked in a cage." Out at the booking desk, Sergeant Kowalski was sipping lukewarm coffee while staring at his computer monitor. The AFS, Automated Fingerprint Identification System database, had finally returned a match for the prints they had just scanned from the woman in cell 3. Kowalski blinked. He wiped his reading glasses on his shirt and put them back on. He leaned closer to the screen. Under the name Sierra Quinn, there was not a rap sheet. There was not a history of burglary, trespassing, or petty theft. Instead, the screen displayed a bright, flashing red banner restricted to federal law enforcement databases. Clearance level, top secret, SCI. Agency, Department of Justice. Title, Deputy Chief, Criminal Division, U.S. Attorney's Office. Kowalski felt the blood drain completely from his face. His stomach dropped into his shoes. He looked up slowly, his eyes wide with a sudden, overwhelming terror, and looked toward the hallway leading to the holding cells. "Brody," Kowalski croaked, his voice cracking. Officer Brody, who had been leaning against the water cooler, laughing with 2 other patrolmen, looked over. Yeah, Sarge, what's up? Found her warrants. Brody, get over here, right now. Before Brody could take a step, the heavy double glass doors of the precinct lobby were violently thrown open. They did not just walk in, they swarmed the room. 6 men and women in dark, tailored suits marched into the precinct with the synchronized precision of a military unit. 2 of them wore tactical vests emblazoned with 3 massive yellow letters, FBI. The noise in the precinct died instantly. Every officer stopped what they were doing. At the head of the formation was Quentin Hale. At 60 years old, the U.S. attorney was an imposing figure, tall, broad-shouldered, with silver hair and eyes that could cut through reinforced steel. Beside him was Cole Vale, the special agent in charge of the local FBI field office. Hale did not stop at the lobby partition. He walked right through the swinging security door, ignoring the protests of a startled rookie, and marched straight up to the booking desk. "Who is the watch commander?" Hale demanded, his voice echoing off the concrete walls like a thunderclap. Captain Brody Lang, hearing the commotion, rushed out of his glass-walled office. "I am. Who the hell are you? And why are you barging into my precinct?" Hale reached into his breast pocket and slapped his federal credentials onto the desk with a sharp smack. "Quentin Hale, United States Attorney for the Northern District. And you, Captain, have exactly 10 seconds to release the woman in holding cell 3 before I shut this entire department down." Captain Lang looked at the badge, then at the FBI agents, and then at Kowalski, who was pale and sweating profusely. "Kowalski, who is in cell 3? "Sierra Quinn, sir," Kowalski stammered. "I just ran her prints, sir. She's the deputy chief of the Federal Criminal Division." The silence that followed was deafening. It was the sound of a dozen police careers collectively flashing before their eyes. "Get her out!" Captain Lang roared, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "Get her out right now!" "Hold on," Hale snapped, holding up a hand. He turned his piercing gaze to the room. "Which one of you is Officer Harlan Brody?" Brody had been standing by the water cooler, frozen in place. The arrogant swagger had completely vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated horror. He swallowed hard, his throat suddenly bone dry. He tentatively raised a shaking hand. I am, sir." Hale slowly walked over to Brody, stopping just inches from his face. The U.S. attorney radiated absolute, terrifying authority. "Officer Brody," Hale began, his voice dangerously soft, "I want you to listen to me very carefully. You initiated a detainment without reasonable suspicion. You demanded identification without legal grounds. You escalated a nonviolent lawful presence on private property into an assault and battery under the color of law. You arrested a top-tier federal prosecutor on her own property. Do you have any idea the magnitude of the mistake you've just made?" Brody could not speak. He looked like he was going to vomit. "I am formally requesting the immediate preservation of all body camera footage, dash camera footage, and dispatch audio related to this incident." Hale continued, turning his head slightly toward Captain Lang while keeping his eyes locked on Brody. "If a single frame of video goes missing, I will bring down federal obstruction charges on this entire building." Down the hall, the heavy iron door of the holding cell clanged open. Sierra Quinn walked into the main booking area. She had not changed. She was still in her oversized hoodie and sweatpants, but as she walked toward the group, her posture was regal, commanding, and utterly lethal. She stopped next to Hale, crossing her arms over her chest. Brody looked at her, his eyes wide with pleading terror. "Ma'am, Miss Quinn, I didn't know." "Ignorance of the law is no excuse, officer," Sierra said, quoting the exact phrase cops love to use on citizens. Her voice was ice cold. "You didn't care to know. You saw a black woman in a wealthy neighborhood and decided my constitutional rights were optional." She turned to Captain Lang. "Captain, I expect Officer Brody to be stripped of his badge and gun pending a full federal investigation into criminal civil rights violations under 18 U.S.C. Section 242. As for the rookie who assisted him, Officer Voss, he has exactly one chance to write a completely truthful report, or he goes down as an accessory." It will be done, ma'am," Captain Lang said, physically shrinking under her gaze. Sierra nodded once. "Quentin, let's go. I still have boxes to unpack." The walk out of the precinct was legendary. The federal agents flanked Sierra as she walked out the double glass doors, leaving a stunned, terrified police department in her wake. The karma did not end there. Officer Harlan Brody was officially fired and facing a federal grand jury indictment for deprivation of rights under color of law. His pension was frozen, his career obliterated by his own arrogance. But Sierra did not forget the catalyst of the whole ordeal. Eleanor Crowe was sitting in her living room in Fairview Estates, sipping tea and feeling rather proud of herself for keeping the neighborhood safe. A sharp knock at the door interrupted her quiet morning. Eleanor opened the door, expecting a delivery. Instead, she found two FBI agents standing on her porch. "Eleanor Crowe," the lead agent asked, flashing his badge. "We are investigating a felony swatting incident and the filing of a false police report that led to the unlawful arrest of a federal official. We need you to come with us." Across the street, Sierra Quinn stood on her porch, dressed in her sharpest tailored federal courtroom suit. She held a steaming mug of coffee, watching the agents escort a weeping, handcuffed Eleanor Crowe out of her home and into a dark SUV. Sierra took a slow sip of her coffee, smiled, and went back inside her beautiful, quiet new home. Karma does not just hit. Sometimes it wears a federal badge and drops a legal hammer. If this ultimate story of arrogant authority getting put in its place gave you absolute chills, smash that like button right now. Share this explosive video with your friends. Subscribe to our channel for more unbelievable true stories, and drop a comment below. What would you have said to the cop when the FBI walked in?